In this video, I'm going to be exploring the best possible way to make a grilled cheese sandwich. Firstly, I'm going to be looking at Ethan Chlebowski's version of the inside-out grilled cheese, which is certainly by any stretch of the imagination a solid sandwich. But today, we'll be using cooking techniques and a bit of ingenuity and flair to make my version of the sandwich, which I like to call the Gregory D Toasty. The Gregory D Toasty is not just gooey but creamy on the inside. It's not just crispy but crunchy on the outside, with a bespoke, unrivaled cheesy seal and a cheese pull that is, well, I can't give that away just yet really, can I? My name's Gregory D and welcome to the Fake Kitchen, and if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. For the purposes of this illustration, I'm going to be trying to keep as many of the ingredients as possible the same in my sandwich as Ethan used in his sandwich. That way, we can get more of an apples for apples-esque comparison. With that being said, I have made a couple of minor changes to my recipe that I will cover later. But ultimately, what I'm attempting to showcase here by keeping the ingredients the same isn't an alternative grilled cheese recipe, rather an alternative method by which to make a grilled cheese. A method that could well change the way you look at a slice of bread forever. First off, we're going to make Ethan's sandwich. Then we're going to look at the changes I decided to make. And then we're going to make my sandwich. And finally, we're going to do a side-by-side taste test. Let's fire in. Ethan suggests making your own sandwich loaf for the perfect toasty. Now, there was never any chance I was going to mess about making my own sandwich bread when I don't really tend to eat white bread anyway. So the prospect of baking a whole loaf of bread for the purposes of this experiment wasn't too appealing. Instead, this lovely store-bought beauty will do the job nicely. And as we're using the same bread for both toasties, I think we can agree that it's not going to cause too much of a problem. As per Ethan's instructions, we set the pan on a medium-low heat, spread each slice of bread with mayo, then pop the bread in the pan mayo face down. Then we proceed to drop on our cheeses of choice. Ethan adds Gouda, followed by a slice of American cheese and then grated cheddar respectively. Next, we pop on the top of the sandwich and toast one side low and slow until perfection, and then flip for the other side. Once both sides are well toasted, we add some cheddar to the pan with a sprinkle of cayenne pepper, and as this cheese melts, we drop on the sandwich. We cook it until crispy and then repeat the same process on the other side. We cut on a diagonal and then for the cheese pull. Now, this is definitely a good sandwich, but let's take a look at some of the adjustments I've chosen to make in my version, and more importantly, why. Firstly, the American cheese choice. There was no way in the world I was ever going to throw a slice of American cheese in a toasty with two other real cheeses. Ethan qualifies his bold American cheese selection by arguing its legitimacy as a real cheese that is just broken down into other cheeses with emulsifier thrown in. Ethan aptly touches on it being a bit similar to making meat from other meat. And therefore, I thought I'd use chicken as an example to illustrate the reasoning behind my firm decision against this selection. On the left, we have a chicken burger. You could present an argument, albeit a tenuous one, that this is still real chicken in the same way you could with the cheese. It's made from select cuts of chicken that have been broken down and processed further with additives and stabilizers to resemble which might appear at first glance to look like the real thing, but on closer inspection is nothing but mush. We compare this to some delicious actual succulent chicken breast, and the difference just speaks for itself. If we were going to choose a slice of either one of these to make a perfect chicken sandwich, I know which one I'd be choosing. Ethan further defends his position on American cheese on meltability grounds, claiming that American cheese offers a gooiness that just isn't possible with any other cheeses. But this is just not true. There are many other cheeses out there, real cheeses, that offer better gooiness and texture for that matter. For my toasty, I've chosen to use Camembert. This beautiful real cheese, or something like Brie for example, will provide the perfect gooey interior for our sandwich. And to further bolster my choice of Camembert over American cheese, if you're still skeptical that is, I did a melt taste test in the microwave with both cheeses. Look at the Camembert, it's silky and slick and smooth, whereas the consistency of the American is just claggy and sticky. And that's without even venturing into any of the taste benefit. The second change is just a simple taste preference. Instead of seasoning the outer cheese with cayenne, I'm going to add a diced garlic clove and a quarter of a diced red onion to the interior for added punch and texture. Lastly, rather than 2 slices of bread, I'm just going to use 1. That's right, 1. And notice that the slice I'm cutting is no thicker or thinner than a regular slice of bread. Oh, and there is one last other thing actually. I'm omitting the use of mayonnaise. I just feel it's superfluous for this sandwich. The natural fats from the cheese will be more than enough to satisfy any cheese toasty fiend's palate. So off we go then. We give the bread a quick light toasting in the toaster on each side and then remove the straight crust, and with a butter knife gently slide it down inside and move along, being careful not to crack the sides. This is a lot easier than it might look. The toasted exterior creates a sturdy wall that with a bit of care prevents a blunt knife from slipping through. Once you've made the incision, work your finger along inside to open the pocket. Next it's time to add your cheeses of choice. I'm going for Camembert, grated cheddar, Gouda with the chopped garlic and onion. Push down into the toasty and then add more until full. Lay a landing strip of grated cheddar in the pan, allow to melt, and lay your sandwich in with the opening facing towards the middle of the strip. Once this is cooked for 2 or 3 minutes on this side, turn and repeat the process until the other side is toasted, and then cut on a diagonal. And now for the cheese pull. Now I mean, that is a pull if I've ever seen one. It's got bits of onion and garlic speckled throughout that pulled cheese. It makes it a real spectacle. I couldn't resist that mouthful even on camera. Anyway, back to this comparison. Now this is not a size competition, but you look at these toasties side by side and the first thing that strikes me is the size difference. With twice as much bread being used in Ethan's, which then in turn means the cheese to bread ratio of mine is a lot greater. Yes, you've got a few crunchy edges of cheddar on Ethan's, but on mine you've got those crunchy edges plus that cheese seal that is just a real bespoke feature of this sandwich. And the other thing is, before I've even taken a bite of either, Ethan's just doesn't really excite me. To look at it, it literally does look like a couple of bits of bread toasted with a bit of cheese in between. The Gregory D toastie, on the other hand, especially taking into account that it's made with the same ingredients, is like another species. So it's finally time for the taste test, and whilst I appreciate you can't taste through the screen, you're going to have to trust my wholly impartial, unbiased reaction. First it's Ethan's. It's a solid toasty. I'd have no grumble whatsoever if I received this in a cafe. The cayenne's working well. It's a nice all-round grilled cheese. And now for the Gregory D toasty. I mean, I let the dance speak for itself. The best way I can think of describing this is it's a bit like eating something that you're pleasantly satisfied with and then eating something straight after that just blows your mind. The bar has just got higher, a lot higher. For me, on its own, Ethan's sandwich is a stand-up sandwich, but side by side with the Gregory D Toasty, it's not even close. There's just too much bread in Ethan's, too much untoasted and therefore uncrunchy bread, meaning the crunch on the outside is just dwarfed by the dough. It reminds me of eating a cheese pudding, if there is such a thing. Also, talking of gooiness and creaminess, that of the Gregory D Toasty and the Camembert is far superior than the American cheese offers in Ethan's. It's just worlds apart. Not to mention, mine contains a lot less calories, no mayonnaise, no processed cheese, and is all round the healthier, lighter option. I did notice that Ethan's cheese pull was pretty much non-existent on this video, whereas my cheese pull was epic. But in all fairness, I think that's down to the way you cut your toasty. It's just common sense, really. I noticed on Ethan's video, he cuts right through the whole thing with a knife. If you want it to pull, obviously don't cut right through it, just score through the bread each side and then pull, and you'll get a great cheese pull with either toasty. To illustrate my point, with the rest of Ethan's, I tried that strategy, and this is the pull we got. Lastly, I did notice in making both sandwiches that making Ethan's, it was so evident how attentive you had to be throughout the cooking process. It's a game of keeping the heat high enough to melt the cheese inside but low enough not to burn the bread, even when you're using mayo rather than butter. It takes a considerable amount of time and patience to achieve this, which begs the question, do you really want to spend all that time making a sandwich? I mean, it's not a 3-course meal, is it? An element of convenience here has to be considered. Mine takes less than half that time. Because the bread's thinner, the cheese melts instantly, without the need for any additional fats. Anyway, with that all being said, this video was never about saying my sandwich is better than yours, even though it clearly is. It was all about showing you guys some new techniques, so next time you're in the mood for a grilled cheese sandwich, you've got a couple of nice options to choose from. Well, one very nice one. And by the way, if you've not checked out Ethan's video, be sure to do that. It's a great video, I'll link that in the description. And also, if you manage to make any of these cheesy creations, do not forget to tag me on Instagram, I would love to see them. And finally, don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you on the next one.